Close your eyes right now and picture your childhood bedroom. You can probably see it. The walls, the door, maybe even where the sunlight hit the floor in the afternoon. Now try something else. Picture the smell of your grandmother's kitchen. Not the memory of being there, the actual smell. Try to conjure it in your mind the same way you conjured that room.
You can't do it. And that's not a failure on your part. That's not a lack of imagination. Every single human being who has ever lived has the exact same blank spot. You can picture a face with your eyes closed. You can replay a song in your head note for note. You can even imagine the taste of a lemon so vividly your mouth waters. But smell is different. Smell refuses to show up on command. And the reason why reveals something strange about how your brain is actually built.
Let's start with the setup, because this asymmetry is bizarre when you actually think about it. Ask someone to picture the Mona Lisa, and their visual cortex lights up almost the same way it would if they were looking at the real painting. Ask someone to imagine a trumpet solo, and their auditory cortex activates in a strikingly similar pattern to actually hearing one. Vision and sound can be simulated internally with real fidelity. Smell cannot. You can know what your morning coffee smells like. You can even get a flicker of it if something nearby happens to smell close enough, but you cannot sit in a silent room and deliberately manufacture that scent from nothing the way you can manufacture an image or a melody. To understand why, you have to look at how smell physically reaches your brain, because it takes a completely different route than every other sense you have. When light hits your eyes or sound hits your ears, that information travels first to a structure called the thalamus. Think of the thalamus as a switchboard operator. It receives the raw signal, organizes it, and routes it up to the cortex, where conscious processing happens. Every sense follows this path. Every sense except one.
Smell skips the switchboard entirely. Your olfactory bulb, the structure that first receives scent information, sits directly above your nasal cavity and connects straight into your limbic system. That's the amygdala, which processes emotion, and the hippocampus, which handles memory. No layover, no switchboard. Smell walks straight into the oldest, most primitive part of your brain before your conscious mind even gets a vote.
Neuroscientists have known about this direct wiring for decades, but the imaging studies from the 2000s made the contrast impossible to ignore. When researchers scanned people trying to visualize an image, the visual cortex activated in a pattern closely resembling actual sight. When they scanned people trying to summon a scent with nothing physically present, the olfactory region stayed almost silent. The equipment for imagining smell, the same way you imagine sight, simply doesn't fire the way it should. It's not that people are bad at it, it's that the machinery for voluntary olfactory imagery is remarkably weak compared to every other sense you have. Psychologist Rachel Hertz, who has spent much of her career studying the link between smell and emotion, found something that makes this even stranger. Smell is arguably the sense most tightly bound to memory and feeling. A single scent can drop you back into a specific afternoon from 20 years ago faster and more completely than any photograph. This is sometimes called the Proust phenomenon, named for the writer who described an entire childhood flooding back the instant he tasted a pastry dipped in tea. Hertz's research confirmed this isn't just a literary flourish. Odor-triggered memories are consistently rated as more emotional and more vivid than memories triggered by any other sense. So here's the paradox sitting right in the middle of this. Smell is the sense most capable of overwhelming you with memory and emotion when it arrives uninvited. And it's simultaneously the sense you have the least voluntary control over. You cannot summon it. You can only be ambushed by it. That's the part that should stop you. Every other sense you own, you can operate like a tool. You point your visual imagination at a memory, and you get a picture. You point your auditory imagination at a song, and you get the melody. But smell doesn't work like a tool you pick up. It works like a door that only opens from the other side. Something in the world has to trigger it. You don't get to knock. Why would evolution build one sense to be this uncontrollable while making every other sense obedient? The leading theory comes down to what smell was originally for. Vision and hearing evolved partly to help you plan, predict, and simulate. You needed to imagine a predator's path before it appeared, to rehearse a hunt before it happened. Simulation was survival. But smell evolved for something more immediate.
Smell exists to answer one question as fast as possible. Is this food, this water, this air safe right now? There was no evolutionary advantage in imagining a threat's scent in advance. A threat you can smell is already close. The system was built for detection in the moment, not projection into the future. Speed and reflex mattered more than rehearsal, so the wiring for voluntary simulation was never prioritized the way it was for sight and sound.
That's the mainstream explanation, and most olfactory researchers accept some version of it. But a few scientists studying scent and memory have pushed back on how complete this picture really is. Some argue we're underestimating how much variation exists between individual brains. A small number of people describe unusually vivid, almost photographic ability to recall scent internally, while a small number of others report almost no ability to smell anything in their mind's eye at all, similar to how some people experience aphantasia, the inability to visualize images. If olfactory imagery exists on a spectrum this wide, then maybe the story isn't that humans universally lack this ability. Maybe it's that the wiring for it exists, but in most of us it was never strengthened because we never needed it strengthened.
Either way, both explanations point to the same underlying truth. This isn't a flaw in your imagination, it's a design choice baked into the oldest circuitry in your skull, built for a world where smelling something meant it was already right in front of you. So the next time you catch a scent that pulls you somewhere you haven't thought about in years, notice what's actually happening. You didn't choose that memory. You didn't request it. Something older than your conscious mind reached back through time and handed it to you without asking permission. That's the part of your brain you don't get to operate. You just get to live in it.
And maybe that's the strangest part of being human. You can conjure faces, sounds, entire imagined worlds just by closing your eyes. But the sense most capable of shattering you with a single breath of air is the one you have no control over at all. You are not the one holding the door. You're just the one standing behind it, waiting for it to open.